Hi, I'm Andy Whitmore.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Formanak.
We are at the Faubus House, designed by Ife Jones.
And you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guyout, and today we welcome back one of our favorite guests, YouTube star Professor Stewart Hicks. Later on, Brian Horowitz revives the joy and nostalgia of that mid-century pastime that our parents told us was going to rot our mid-century minds, pinball. We'll also visit with author Hillary Carlip. She's got a new pop-up book sharing the wonderful world of Willis Wonderland. And now your host, popping up all over the place, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thanks, Tom. This U.S. Modernist thing that I started 18 years ago has been a wonderful experience. And as part of that, I get invited to speak all over the country to art, museum, and real estate groups. People are so welcoming and kind and curious about modernism, whether they lived through mid-century and are looking back, or they aspire to create it in their lives for decades ahead. Everyone wants to know how they can have their own piece of the action. The houses, the furniture, the barware, the art, the clothes, the music, the martinis, and wrapping it all up, the vibe. Modernism wasn't always so cool. It fell out of favor in the 1970s and everyone thought it was dead. There was a time in the 80s when you could get amazing houses by famous architects for $100,000 or less. Bargains were everywhere. Now, not so much. So people wonder, what if I build one? Do you have a dream of a modernist house but have given up? Have you been reading too many architecture coffee table books? Have you squandered your evenings watching too many HGTV shows? If so, you've probably come to the reasonable conclusion that modernism just isn't affordable for the average person. This is just not true. It's a meticulously curated, influencer-fueled media fantasy that scares people off. Those magazines and shows typically aren't showing shortcuts. They're showing high taste. The true essence of modernism is affordability. Houses built with simple materials, assembled with precision that doesn't require fussy, expensive ornamentation. Early homes by Gill, Gropius, Breuer, and Wright's Usonians sought to create small, beautiful, functional living at a reasonable price. You could practically clean these houses with a single Swiffer. They were efficient, they hugged the landscape, and they made you feel like you were living in a work of art without having to sell your soul to do it. But you might say to me, George, I just don't have the money to spend on an architect. Wrong answer. You can't afford not to hire an architect, and here's why. Architects are highly trained in scale, structure, and space in ways that you are not. They know stuff that can save you money. I live in a 2,400 square foot house built in 2010. When people come over, I ask them how many square feet they think it is, and typical guesses are between 3,000 and 3,200 because the house feels that large. That's around 700 square feet of benefit we didn't have to pay for. At today's construction cost of $200 to $300 a square foot, which is conservative, that's between $140,000 and $210,000 of savings. Serious money. An architect is going to cost you on average about 12% of construction costs, or in this case, about $72,000. Do the math. You are way ahead. Don't think of modernism as a style you can't afford. You can certainly bling it out, but you don't have to. Your house can be simple, pure, and so efficient that with all that money you save, you can buy even more expensive coffee table books. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Architects complain constantly that the public doesn't understand or appreciate what they do. But there's one man,
one mission, double the action, triple the excitement.
Excitement, making architecture understandable for the public. Returning guest Stewart Hicks is Associate Dean at the University of Illinois Chicago's School of Architecture. with a master's from Princeton.
Go Tigers!
Stewart's YouTube channel, Architecture with Stewart, breaks down architectural concepts into wonderfully understandable ideas. He's been recognized through the Architectural Record Design Vanguard Award, the Chicago Architecture Biennial, Design Miami, the V&A Museum in London, and Tate Modern. With over 600,000 subscribers, Architecture with Stewart shares 3D animations, drawings, and good storytelling to explain building design, construction, and city planning. And no one rocks a mustache today like the pride of the cello section at Huron High in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Welcome, Stewart.
Wow, that was incredible. Not only was there the deep dive into my high school days, but wow. Thank you for that introduction.
Double the action, triple the excitement.
Exactly.
Yeah, that ought to do it for you.
Wow.
So, Stewart, are you still playing the cello?
It was a bass.
It was a bass.
It was bass, yeah. And I recently did purchase an electric bass to try and pick it back up because the upright bass is not one that I keep in my small Chicago apartment. But the electric one fits a little bit better. But I haven't been keeping up with it as much as I'd like.
You haven't joined a band yet?
No, I think that's the key, right? To kind of keeping you into it.
Yeah.
Just like plucking it in your den doesn't do it.
You can come back on the show as one of our musical guests.
I don't think many people are able to noodle around on the bass by themselves.
Right. It's not really a solo instrument.
I have a friend who plays the bass, and we visited back in March. I play a little piano, and he immediately got out his bass and started playing along. I think he'd been waiting for somebody else to jam with.
Well, that's cool.
And it was actually really cool.
That is cool.
Well, Stewart, let's start off with an item most people who are not architects had never heard of, but they've likely seen one. What is a truss plate, and how did it transform home building?
Well, funny you should ask. Yeah, a truss plate is a piece of metal, usually galvanized metal, that is stamped into some multiple of little spikes that act as nails that hold wood pieces together at various angles. So instead of one or two or three nails, you're able to attach wood members end to end or end to side and hold them securely together and with minimal work.
Those little silver squares you see at construction sites up in the rafters.
You're right. I have seen those,
That's
and
right.
now I know what to call them and sound knowledge-able.
Yes.
Thanks,
At
Stuart.
cocktail parties, you're going to rock, Tom.
Yeah, they were originally called a gang nail plate, and then they've taken other names. And in a recent video, I explored their impact on the construction industry and the way that we've been designing as a result. And it's pretty fascinating stuff.
There was a guy who was like on a building code committee, and he went into business making these.
Yeah, that's right. So he was in Florida, and he was part of the folks who were looking at writing building codes so that the houses could be hurricane proof. And so he was focused specifically on the roofs that were flying off in hurricane winds. And he, after working on that, set his sights on trying to solve some of the problems that he saw coming up. And that gang nail plate was his invention. And he not only took out the patent for that plate itself, but he took out the patent for its construction and the process for prefabricating trusses off-site to then bring onto site. So he was
He's a truss mogul.
forward-thinking.
Yeah.
Yes, actually, yes. He's been called the Henry Ford of building and architecture because of his single-handedly automating a huge chunk of the construction process for homes.
Now, one of the things I found fascinating about your video on this, and I was anticipating an explosion special effect. We didn't quite get there. But it was your animation of the house under high wind. Now, I think of when a tornado comes, that it just somehow catches the roof and blows it off. But it's actually a more complicated principle. What is that one? How does it blow the roof off?
Yeah, with a great party. Yeah, it basically gets sucked off. So
It
it works like
explodes
an
from the
airplane
inside,
wing.
right? It pushes it
Yeah,
out.
that's part of it. Yeah, so air getting inside and pushing it up, but then also because of the way the air flows off over a pitched roof, it creates a suction side on the side that's opposite of the wind and starts to pull it right off. So it's not just pushing it off. There's a whole host of complicated forces that are at play there.
Oh, that's the same principle that lets airplanes fly.
Exactly.
Sort of.
The
That's
Bernoulli
right.
principle, as I think Stewart
That's
pointed
what I
out.
was
That's
gonna
right.
say. Right.
It works. It works for buildings too, apparently.
Now, did the truss plate really make houses hurricane proof? It seemed like that's not a lot to make it work.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's kind of two separate things. So he was working on the committee, and then he invented this truss plate. It wasn't
Okay.
the direct invention that made them hurricane proof.
Okay. Now, these days, what does make a house more hurricane proof? Because that's on a lot of people's minds with climate change.
I think it has a lot to do with strapping and holding down the roof in ways other than just a few nails or things like that. So it's about an extra set of connections and also reinforced doors so that they can't get pushed in, and that problem of the differential pressure of the inside and outside operating through seams or gaps that are made through pushing in doors and windows.
Now, your biggest video, I think, to date was about linear cities. You talked about the line, which is called NEOM in Saudi Arabia. That project has been underway, I think, for about 10 years or so and is under construction.
And this is a city in a long line.
A long line, like 120 kilometers long.
But one main street.
Well, not just a street, but a whole series of transportation systems. You can get on a little train and travel from one side of it to the other. This project has been downsized several times from its original intention because of cost and complexity. It's going to be spectacular in many ways, but I was just wondering, how's that working out? I mean, are they doing it? Is it going to be different? What do you think?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't been following it that closely since making that video, other than watching a few others which have checked in over time. And, a lot of the work that I've seen having done is preparing the land for the work. I haven't seen any that are actually, coming out of the ground yet. But yeah, you're right. It's become much more modest in scope and size in various stages. And a lot of the work that I've seen coming out of the design show it through lots of different points of view from different architects. What's happened is there are different zones that have been given to different teams because it's such a huge project. And each zone seems like it has its own real character based on the architect that's designing that zone, and they're all completely different. So it's hard to get, for me to at least, to get a handle on exactly what it will look like when a lot of the images are looking so different from one another. But yeah, it seems like things are pointing towards its continued construction.
Is anybody thinking of doing this in the U.S.?
Well, they're doing some sort of idealistic cities, right, Stewart? They're doing some big from-scratch cities. Tolosa is one, I think, and there's a couple of more that they're going to try to build a town for the future with these different concepts. But, you're talking billions or trillions of dollars.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's always a few dream cities going on somewhere. Very few end up the way that they were originally intended. We have one here in Chicago called Pullman that was a kind of dream city, but of the 1800s. That one happened to be a company town, and a lot of them tend to be. But linear cities, too, have been a dream of American architects for a while, or urban planners, but none have quite come to fruition. But in that video that you're talking about, I explored some of those, like Eisenman's version of a linear city through New Jersey and things like that, which are always really fascinating.
Did Saudi Arabia call you and invite you over?
No.
No?
No. The video was maybe a little skeptical of the idea, so I'm not sure. I wasn't waiting for a call.
Okay. Well, what are some of the issues with building a linear city that long?
Oh my. Well, there's a lot. I think one is just traffic jams. Like I think one of the reasons that linear cities aren't real popular is because they are so limited in the way that they can grow, right? Like I think cities need to grow organically over time very often as things like the economy shift or the living patterns shift. And if it's so restricted to a single shape, that makes for a very difficult you almost have to predict the future or just not allow it to grow in the way that it needs to. It doesn't have the capacity to really adapt all that much. And, traffic jams being one of those problems. Another one would be wildlife being disrupted, and migration patterns and things like that. You're severing a large swath of land from another swath of land, disrupting ecosystems and things like that.
I guess it's like a big fence in a way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right?
You'd have to have some sort of pass-throughs for the animals if you're going to accommodate those.
Right.
And hunting blinds. So, you
That's
can
right.
shoot them.
Right.
Let's get her done. Okay.
That's right. Dinner's on the table.
It's also not super convenient. Like if you think about like how you travel in your own neighborhood or where I live, I walk everywhere, but things are closer by because they're in two dimensions,
Right.
north, south, or east, west, or whatever. You can fit a lot more around you. But when everything's in a line, there's a much more limited amount of space to put things that you need on an everyday basis. So it makes, it seems like it's really efficient in certain ways, but it introduces a lot of inefficiencies through the strict geometry.
Saudi Arabia is going to be hosting the World Expo in 2030, and they're trying to get everything ready for that big year. For the expo to have the line, there's a port complex that's being built, and a number of other sort of high-end resorts, particularly on the Red Sea, near that kind of vertex between Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. That whole area is being highly developed. It's going to be pretty spectacular over there.
Sounds like it.
Now, you and your wife, Allison, wrote a book called Misguided Tactics for Propriety Calibration. Now, this sounds to me like how to cheat a breathalyzer test. Am I right?
Yeah, we did write a little book, and the title was meant to be a little bit of a joke, because we were interested in the idea of character in architecture. I think we've talked about this in the past, but and that book was an attempt to look at like Midwestern architecture and how it might be a good model for a way of thinking about character in architecture. And so there's different ways. One of the things that we find so interesting is like the world's largest ball of twine, like this instinct to try and create distinction and identity through things that are like innocuous, but like, we have the largest strawberry and,
that building is shaped like a basket. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think in High Point, North Carolina, there's a giant chair.
Right.
That kind of
where
thing, where they made furniture.
Yeah, where they make a lot of chairs. Yeah.
Yep.
So like that, that need to create identity, but not through, I don't know, like anything that is too off-putting or too eccentric or anything like that. And so that's one way of thinking about character. Like you create something unique and give it character by having these stories about a place and these large things that go along with those stories and identities. But then you also think about character being like the historic courthouse or something like that, and the brick and stuff that it's made out of. And so we were trying to like think about like how are those two things related? Like those two things seem really different as a way of creating character for a place like the Midwest. And so that's what we were trying to figure out.
It seems like today's version of that, world's biggest ball of string, is to get somebody like, Norman Foster to build a museum or airport in your town. It's not the old school kind of attraction that it was before, right?
That's the ones that are tough because that's kind of imported, right? Like it's not something that comes from the place, but it's a way of trying to get on the map, like literally or figuratively, by creating a cultural attraction and some starchitect Bilbao effect.
Something like Little Island in New York or the High Line for that matter? I mean, that's an attraction that, especially with the High Line, they took something that was already there, an elevated railroad. And made it something.
Like to create like an experience or something like a really unique experience. Yeah.
Now, your show I love because it's so good for mere mortals like us who are not architects, right? I can watch any of your segments and I can really learn something. How do you decide on what topics to do? And how can you tell whether something is really of general interest versus being kind of too inside baseball architects only?
Wow. If I knew that, I would have a lot more subscribers. That's a good question, and it's one that I'm trying to answer and think about all of the time. I think that a lot of it just has to do with like how you can frame a story or a problem or something so that people can get in easily and interested into it easily. So is there a way of just stating it? There's a really great YouTuber named Tom Scott, and he talked about his a video title for one of his, and he talked about a aquarium for sharks as a spacesuit for sharks. And by just kind of defamiliarizing something like that, like an aquarium, by just changing the terminology a little bit,
from
it
the
kind of piques
shark's
your interest.
perspective.
Yeah.
From the shark's
exactly.
perspective, it's like a spacesuit. I get it.
Right. So it creates this curiosity gap that like you want to learn more about that because of just that reframing. And that video, if it's called something about spacesuits for sharks, you're probably willing to go pretty deep in the rabbit hole learning about that stuff just because your interest has been piqued. And so I think the same is true for architecture. I think it's about finding those kind of ins and language shakeups a little bit that can allow people to see something that maybe that's familiar, but seeing it in a new way that piques their interest and grabs their attention and to want to learn a little bit more about it.
This is a good year to do it because it's the 50th anniversary of Jaws.
There you go.
From 1975. So sharks are going to be really in this year.
Right.
Yeah. And that favorite catchphrase from the movie, we're going to need a bigger boat.
Yep.
Or spacesuit.
Yeah.
Yes, for the shark.
Have you ever done a segment on architects that are famous for something other than architecture, Stewart?
No.
You got some ideas?
I have some suggestions, actually.
Oh, yeah?
So, number one, the world's most stupid architect, Peter Cook.
Okay.
Who cheated on Christie Brinkley.
Oh.
Wait, the other Peter Cook?
Yeah, Peter Cook, the architect.
From New York, not Archigram Peter Cook.
No. I don't think he was married to Christie Brinkley.
Right, okay.
No, this is the one out on Long Island who I think had a deal with his nanny or something, And then, of course, there's Rex Heuermann, the Go-Go Beach Killer, another architect in the news.
Recently been in the news, yeah.
I bring this up because it seems like architects get the most publicity, right, when there's something like that going on versus connecting with the public about architecture.
That's true.
So maybe that could be a way to segue into something.
Infamous architects.
The spacesuit entree into your topic matter.
Yeah, that's interesting. So their profession is something that kind of makes the headline when they go nutty in some way.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly.
Another one of those mass killer architects. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what segments are you working on for the rest of 2025? What do we got to look forward to?
Let's see. Doing one on rotating restaurants. They're kind of coming back, and that's kind of an interesting thing.
Love that.
Yeah, kind of wondering why. We're working on one about how buildings are retrofit to prevent crime and explosions and things like that. So, like how we make buildings safer. Do you know what would happen inside of the parlor room inside of like an old house? I've noticed in old house plans, the rooms would be named as a parlor.
Yeah.
Do you know what would happen in there?
So that was your entertaining space. Sometimes the more informal entertaining space, like when a suitor would come a courting for your daughter, you would put them in the parlor together with a little tea.
Yeah, so we're looking at one that's talk about how life was different in different eras of floor plans with different room names and things like that. I also heard that the parlor was a space for all of your nicest versions of things. So like, and it included your bed. So the nicest bed would go in there too,
In the
and so
parlor?
people would sleep
Huh.
in the parlor. Yeah, so it wasn't just about like the public ness of it. It was about pooling all of your nice things that people would show and things like that. So
Wow.
Now, is that how we get massage parlor? Because there's a bed involved?
maybe
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
watch out for that video
Tattoo
coming
parlor,
later,
yep.
2025.
Tattoo
Okay.
parlor? Yeah. There's lots of parlors of dubious origins. Stewart, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. His channel is Architecture with Stewart, available wherever YouTube is served.
Thank you so much for having me.
We were speaking with Stewart Hicks.
If you are of a certain age, and we won't say exactly what age that is, you remember the pinball machine was a major part of life growing up. And our guest today is Brian Horowitz of Creative Arcades. Hi, Brian.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it very much. It's an exciting opportunity.
So let's try to go back in time. As far as you know, what are the origins of pinball?
Pinball actually started in the old barn type environment. So they created pins. They created a pin system, but more it was on a gambling device. It was a way that they would move the machine with rockers instead of flippers. And that's how they made the ball have movements. And there were little pockets that you would win money off of. So what was pretty cool in the old days is when the ball would go through the thing, it had a buzzard sound, similar to, when you're playing those medical games that you're sticking in there and trying not to touch anything.
Yeah.
Well, when the ball went in the hole, it made a crazy buzzing sound. And then eventually they added lighting and they kept developing it to what you see pinball is today, more virtual or traditional with flippers. What was unique is the concept was there, but it was developed a lot different. It was more on a pivot rocker type of thing that you would rock and move the ball around. So it was something that people already had a passion for. And, some crazy and great inventors kept improving it to where we see today. Pinball for us brings back a lot of memories, and it's funny. I get customers all the time saying, "Hey, can you stick a quarter on the machine?" And in the 80s where I grew up, the quarter was the way you stood in line for your placement, and it's funny is my number 2 daughter, she goes, "Dad, why would they put quarters on there? Aren't they worried somebody was going to take them?" Well, in the 80s and 90s, it was, a different world.
Yes.
And these days, it's more, you wouldn't want to leave a quarter up there. It probably would get taken. It's kind of a shame. But, it was fun. There was a lot of things that we grew up in the 80s on pinball, and now it's coming back. You're getting a lot of restaurants. And for us, we get a lot of families buying pinballs to put in their homes for their children to get off their cell phones and do something as a family. And one lady, she actually has it on a paid device. If her son does his homework, she gives him money and he can play pinball if he does his homework.
That's genius.
No, I think it's pretty cool. And, we have dentist offices putting pinballs and arcades in their facilities as a toy box because it makes kids want to go there and play. Who wants to go to a dentist office? But if you go there and play some arcades, you just got to open your mouth with the dentist. Why not?
Now, these early machines that you were describing were really more about gambling. They were like a slot machine. And as a result of that, a lot of states banned these machines, even after they stopped being for gambling. I believe that South Carolina still bans them. Is that right?
Digital pinball, the V-Pin style, we could sell to South Carolina, no problem at all. Also Maine, but you have to do them as non-coin device. They have to be strictly for consumer use, non-commercial use.
I was amazed to learn that New York banned them until 1976, which is crazy. And Chicago had a ban on them, Salt Lake City, Philadelphia. It was all some kind of degenerate activity as it was, portrayed by the public, but these were really pretty harmless machines.
Yeah, they're very harmless. They're more on an entertainment purpose, but like any entertainment purpose, people like to increase gambling, making gambling as part of the sideway. There's a lot of excitement when people are gambling, but now it's excitement by getting high scores. Then there wasn't a way to keep track of scores. There wasn't a scoring mechanism. It was more a way to play, and you kept track. You had a little card that you would check off which hole you got, and you would total your score, similar to like miniature golf type of device.
Now, when I was playing this actively, and that was in the 80s, there were just a couple of companies. The ones I remember were Bally, Williams, and Gottlieb. Is that right?
Yeah, and then Stern is another one. Stern is a big one. And what's interesting is they're pretty much all made in Chicago.
Oh, okay. So that's kind of the center of the universe for pinball.
Yeah, it's pretty unique, but they're all out there. And it's interesting because, one guy that's an engineer at one company will leave and go work at the other company. I actually went there and got a tour of Stern, and it's a lot of overseas parts, but they're assembling it and putting it together. And, it's nice. It's nice to see something actually being made in the U.S.
Now, what happened when software came to pinball machines and microprocessors? When was that?
That was 2012 was when the first digital pinball came out, but it was a combination digital and traditional. It just had certain areas that were working digital. And 2018, a company called V-Pin came out with the first digital virtual pinball machine. They actually went on Shark Tank and didn't get a deal, but it was a very expensive unit. It was about $15,000, and it was made overseas. And the problem was it had a couple games, and it didn't have the excitement as the virtual pinballs do now, and didn't have the realistic part as a V-Pin.
I remember there was one movie in about 1973, I think, that really blew up the pinball world and everybody wanted to play. Do you know which movie I'm talking about?
No, I don't. Which one was it?
Tommy.
Oh, yeah. Big time. Big time.
About a pinball star.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that one.
And The Who had the great soundtrack, of course, and it was a movie, and all the kids wanted to go see Tommy.
Oh, yeah. Yep, and there's a Tommy pinball machine out there, and Who has one? You got Kiss is probably the most popular pinball machine out there, that and Indiana Jones.
Oh, really? Those are the top two?
Those are the top two. You have Addams Family is pretty popular, Jaws. But, Indiana Jones, it has some amazing side effects. It has upper flippers. A lot of pinballs don't have upper flippers. Kiss because of the music. Rolling Stones is a good one. I personally like Rolling Stones. I like the music that plays behind it. Beatles is too traditional. It doesn't have a lot of excitement. A lot of these artists actually have an input into the machines. Gene Simmons claims, and I believe it, that he helped design his pinball machine, the Kiss pinball machine.
Now, tell me about your pinball machine. It's called the Virtual Pinball 1080?
Yeah, so it's a virtual pinball. We have ones that are force feedback. That means when you hit the bumpers, you feel the bang in your machine. You could tilt it because it has a gyro. The flippers, when you hit the flippers, you feel the hitting the balls. That's kind of our flagship model. It's the TR2 V-Pin with 327 games. And then we also have combo pinballs that are really unique. You have about 1,000 pinball games, and then you have about 6,000 classic arcades. So it actually has joysticks and the buttons and the trackball on top, and then you have the V-Pin flippers on the sides. So you could play both. You get the best of both worlds. So on this pinball machine, you could be playing Galaga on the big 43-inch screen or on the 32-inch screen up top, and then you could be playing Jaws pinball. What I like about V-Pin is it looks real. The sound effects are awesome, but what's cool is it's more accurate. Regular pinball machines break. They're very hard to fix. A V-Pin is technology, so it's super easy to fix and take care of. And the sound effects, the subwoofer and the bass on the virtual pinballs are incredible. They're off the hook.
One of the little possessions I happen to have is a pinball.
Oh, there you go.
That I found one day in a bar just sitting over in the corner. I don't know how it escaped the pinball machine it was in. Maybe someone smashed it up. But I have this right on my desk because I remember spending lots of fun hours playing these machines.
Yep, that is awesome. You know, what's interesting is there was a company out of Phoenix that tried making a pinball machine, and they used the plungers, and they have magnetic plungers. So if you roll the ball over, the magnetic part would catch it, and then the electricity, the power, would demagnetize it to release it. It was a really good system, but the problem is eventually the magnetic wore out. It lost its because of the electricity feeding in it. But it was a really neat concept.
We looked up where you can go to play pinball on both digital machines and the old analog machines. The largest place is the Pinball Hall of Fame in Las Vegas, which is cited as having the world's largest collection, about 700 machines in about 25,000 square feet, anything from the 50s to the 90s and some modern machines. There is the Next Level Pinball Museum in Hillsboro, Oregon, which has about 200 machines. And then there are other large ones in Georgia and Brookfield, Illinois. Any other locations that come to mind?
Yeah, St. Paul, Minnesota, there's a street that has about 9 restaurants, and each restaurant has between 30 to 80 pinball machines in their basement. And they're all old school pinball. We do have our virtual in a couple of them, but it's pretty unique. Pretty much every quarter they have a contest who gets high scores on the different machines. And you know, on YouTube you'll see a bunch of videos of these people competing, but it's nice to see that pinball's brought back a whole neighborhood and really brought these restaurants back to permission. You know, there's a hamburger in Minnesota called Juicy Lucy. It's a stuffed cheeseburger, but it's stuffed. And all 7 of the restaurants all sell Juicy Lucy's. And it's kind of the thing, they're trying to get bragging rights on their burger and their pinballs. Who's going to have the next new pinball machine?
Oh, that's really cool. In the 80s, to play pinball was usually a quarter. How much does it cost now in these restaurants?
It's 75 cents to $1 in most restaurants.
Okay. And I know when you go to some of these large arcades, some of them you put coins in, some of them have tickets, I think, or swipe cards.
Swipers. They use digital swipe cards.
Swipe cards.
The problem with the swipe cards is people don't like it because it doesn't give them the feel of their pinball. It becomes a different world. They like putting the quarters in. Stern did a survey, you know, because they're one of the biggest manufacturers of traditional pinball machines. And the thing that they discovered was quarters still drive the sales. The other one does not.
I can see that because, you know, it was really something to be scrounging around to try to find your quarters.
Yeah, and people just like it because they're putting it in, they're hearing the click sound and just bring back good memories. That's all.
Now, there was a period where pinball evolved, and all of a sudden you had this thing called the extra game or the extra ball. How did that change the field?
It increased a lot because it gave them more playing time. Also, too, it created some more revenue because lots of times you get the option that you can play another round, but you got to put 50 cents in. You got to put more money in to stay playing the machine. Or if you got the extra ball, it brought more excitement. You could have 2-3 balls playing at once, and that was very exciting. Indiana Jones was one of the first machines to come out with a 3-ball capacity. And then the other one was Addams Family. Addams Family also has 3 balls.
So how does a 3-ball system work? I mean, I think we're all familiar with the 1-ball system where you shoot the ball up the chute and it goes around the top and it comes through some initial set of bumpers and flippers and then comes down eventually to your 2 flippers at the bottom. You're trying to hit it back up. But how does a 3-ball system work?
So there's pockets that actually drive the ball from underneath on a conveyor and put it in these pockets or in the upper sections. So when you hit a certain score, they'll shoot out one of these extra balls. So it becomes very active, a little bit hectic, but exciting that you're playing 2 to 3 more balls.
All at the same time?
All at the same time. And you have the upper flippers. You're playing the upper and the lower. So it's skill. You got to have some skill, but it's just excitement. And you're able to run your score up really high.
I'm seeing on Google that you can buy a Indiana Jones pinball machine. It looks like for between like $10,000 to $15,000?
That is correct. And what's interesting is if you hold these pinballs, they keep going up. I paid $4,600 for mine, and it's like having a stock in the stock market. It just keeps going up and up. But the biggest thing is now Stern and Bally's have been able to reproduce parts for the machines. So before, one of the problems was you couldn't find parts, but now there's parts available to fix them. In Michigan, there's actually a pinball convention that they sell all the components from glass and new flippers, new springs, new plungers. It's legit.
Now, are there pinball doctors? Are there people that you can call when your pinball machine goes on the fritz?
Yes, there's one guy that he has a network throughout the U.S. called Pinball Guru. His name is Ivan, and his team all came from pinball facilities, or they work for Benson. And a lot of these guys work for GameWorks when GameWorks was around. And you go online and go to Game Room Guru and you book a tech, and they'll come out to you and fix it. And we use them actually as subcontractors for our company. If we have a problem, they'll go out to our customer's house and fix it. And these guys are awesome.
Oh, that is fantastic. This sounds so fun.
Yeah.
You got a great job, Brian.
You know what? When you get to play arcades, you don't mind coming to work every day. I actually have employees for our multi-cades. There are techs, but they work 7 days a week. And you could call at night or on the weekend and ask how to play a game, and they'll FaceTime you and show you how to play it. Or they'll answer a question or help you.
It's great when they love their job, right?
Yes, and we're always designing new stuff. Our guys were writing code. We're actually working with virtual goggles right now. So you can wear the goggles, and it's virtual. So Jaws is our first one we're working on. We actually partner with a company in Australia and a gentleman named Mike Mika. He's one of the high-end coders out there for arcades. And we're working on that. You wear the goggles and you actually are in the game. And it's pretty trippy. We're only on about 9 slides right now, but we'll have it done by the end of this year.
I definitely want to play that game. Brian is the owner of Creative Arcades, and you can see the machines at creative-arcades.com. Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome. I really enjoyed it. Very nice meeting you. I think what you're doing is pretty awesome.
That was George talking with Brian Horowitz. Hillary Carlip is a wildly creative best-selling author, visual artist, and multimedia innovator. She's written 6 books, including Girl Power and the interactive novel Find Me, I'm Yours. Her artwork has been shown alongside Andy Warhol and Damien Hirst. Known for her humor, subversive style, and love of pop culture, her latest project, Willis Wonderland, the legendary house of atomic kitsch, is a playful pop-up book celebrating the unusual house of Hall of Fame songwriter Allee Willis. Allee recently passed, but you know her songs, Boogie Wonderland and Earth, Wind & Fire's September, just to name a few. George started by asking Hillary Carlip about her distant past.
Hilary, before we start talking about architecture in this wonderful house, tell me what it was like to be on The Gong Show.
The original Gong Show with Chuck Barris, who later on professed to be a CIA assassin.
Right. And there was a movie, right? Yeah. Uh-huh.
Exactly.
But this was in the 70s.
It was. And I was in my teens. And in fact, it was such a crazy experience. I wrote a memoir many years later, and the chapter about the Gong Show became the title of my memoir, which is Queen of the Oddballs. And that's how I felt that day. I was on several times, actually.
So what was your act?
I had written this comedy juggling song. And are you familiar? Do you remember Tom Lehrer at all?
Oh, I love Tom Lehrer. Yes.
Okay. I was going to college and I had written a comedy juggling song to audition for a musical comedy class he was teaching because I couldn't really sing. And it was like, look over here, look at the juggling, be distracted. And Tom Lehrer ended up loving it and helping me rewrite it. And so it was a song co-written by Tom Lehrer.
Now, did you end up doing that act in Xanadu, the movie you were in?
I juggled in Xanadu and did dancing. I didn't do my act.
Okay. I mean, this is just such a fascinating history that you have.
It's definitely on the edge of pop culture, for sure.
And going way back, this was in your youth. You got in trouble for dressing up like Holly Golightly?
Well, not only dressing up, I was in the 6th grade. I was also smoking a cigarette in a cigarette holder on the schoolyard in the 6th grade. So yes, I did get suspended.
And how long was your suspension?
I don't even remember. Hopefully long enough to rewatch Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yeah.
You're going to stay home. Might as well do that.
Very elegant, actually,
Yes.
So this new book of yours called Willis Wonderland is about a particular house and a particular person's dream of their house. So let's start with the person. So tell me about the owner of this house and how she got to put it together.
The owner of the house was Allie Willis, who was a Hall of Fame songwriter. She was responsible for some of the biggest hits of all time, like Earth, Wind and Fire's September and Boogie Wonderland and the Friends theme song.
A Neutron Dance, yes.
Neutron Dance, Color Purple, the musical on Broadway, and then the film. So she actually bought this home. It's in North Hollywood, and it was one of the few homes designed by William Kessling.
William Kessling, sure.
In the 30s. Yes, it's a streamlined modern house. It was supposedly the MGM party house, and she purchased it with her royalty checks from writing Boogie Wonderland, and hence the name Willis Wonderland. That is what she called it. So she was an incredibly creative person. She was a set designer, a multimedia artist, in addition to being a songwriter, and everything she did was just a huge success. And she made this home, like, first of all, totally bright pink, bubblegum pink, and made it into this haven of creativity. So she also was really famous for her parties. It had this incredible backyard, and she would have these parties where there were A-list people and D-list people alike, which was exactly her style. The most famous and the most obscure, like the Del Rubio triplets, 3 older women who wore miniskirts and played guitar. And that was Allie, highbrow, lowbrow.
That's really cool. Now, this house was an Art Deco house when she got it.
Correct.
Not very adorned. What did she start to do to it?
Well, she started definitely creating her own vibe. The front yard had a whole bowling ball garden. There were actual 50s bowling balls in the garden. She also did collect mostly mid-century modern furniture, and she had a completely world-renowned collection of kitsch. So the house was, and still is, full of this incredible collection. Her house was mentioned in the first book that coined the phrase mid-century modern, and her house is in it.
She passed away in 2019, right? So she was there for 40 years, I guess, almost.
Yes, she bought it in 80-something, so yes. Mm-hmm.
Everybody in Hollywood must have known this house.
Absolutely. It was really something. The not only the gatherings, but the collection inside. After she passed away, suddenly her partner of many years started a foundation, the Willis Wonderland Foundation. It was so important to Allie. She wanted it to be a museum or something. She just wanted to keep the house. And they have done everything to try and do that for 6 years. And unfortunately have not been able to keep it up in terms of continuing on. But instead, they asked me to do a pop-up book to memorialize the house and the collection within it.
And there's a documentary too. What is the name of that, and when is it coming out?
The documentary's been out for a year now. It's still streaming on Hulu. It's called The World According to Allie Willis. And it's really something. I can't recommend it highly enough. It so captures her just huge creativity and her commitment to it, and now I'm going to go do this, and everything she did like that was successful and inspiring. So it's a very inspiring film.
How did you decide to do a pop-up book versus just a book?
Well, actually, I wish I could say it was my idea. I was approached by the foundation. I had helped in the early days of the foundation. I'd known Allie for many, many years. We were friends for decades. And I had helped create all the branding for the foundation and design. And Prudence, her partner, and Vince, who is the executive director of the foundation, approached me and said, "Do you think you could do a pop-up book?" And I was like, "Sure," like knowing nothing about them. But I was totally intrigued. And it made sense because the house is so full and so tactile and so not something, it's next level, the house is. And so you had to do something on steroids to really capture it. So I thought it was a brilliant idea. And I set out to find out everything I could about pop-ups. And now I can tell you everything you ever needed to know about them.
Well, I thought I was familiar with pop-up books, but this is the largest pop-up book I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, most of them are about an inch or so, and this like clocks in at maybe 2 or 3 inches of thickness.
It's something like that. Yeah, it's pretty extreme. I just thought if I'm doing this, I'm going all the way. And so there's so many interactive things that happen in the book, things that pull out, that are revealed, that open up, that spin. It's really a testament to her creativity.
I've always wanted to know, I mean, how do you print a pop-up book? How do you even produce one of these things?
So you need a paper engineer. Who knew that was a thing?
Yeah.
So I interviewed about 10 or 12 and landed on working with one in Paris who is phenomenal. Mike Malkovich is his name. And it had to be illustrated. I mean, it could have been photographs, but it just felt like it would capture the vibe so much more just in these brilliant illustrations. So I worked with an illustrator who had done the branding with me early on, Neil McCullough in Ireland. And the three of us just worked and collaborated and created this beautiful thing. So the paper engineer basically designs the whole functionality, how something will fold, where it'll open. And he was incredibly collaborative. Like Allie had crazy clothes that we call kitsch couture. And so I was like, well, we have to feature that somehow. Can we, in her bedroom, like put a chest that opens and you take out paper dolls of her? And he was like, sure, why not? Like he just was very collaborative. And he came up with amazing ideas, as did Neil. And then there's manufacturers who actually manufacture pop-up books and print them. And all along the way, just everyone did such a beautiful job. I'm really proud of it.
I mean, is this something that is 3D printed, or are people assembling the different elements of the paper? How does it actually come together into a book? I'm just curious.
Honestly, I don't even know. It's not 3D printed. All I know is Mike, the paper engineer, provides like a prototype of everything, how everything's supposed to be, and then all the design files that we did. And actually, the really cool thing is the first thing the manufacturer sent to me is a complete white dummy copy of the whole book.
Okay.
So it's just to check the functionality and make sure the pull tabs work and the folds work and everything. And that's a pretty cool thing. And then once we signed off on that, then they applied the art to it. And I couldn't even tell you how they do it.
It's magic, right?
It is. Complete mystery and magic.
It's the same magic that went into this house.
Exactly. Right?
Allie was so famous for all these songs that were just, embedded into popular culture. I can think of, the Friends theme, for instance.
Right.
Everybody knows that.
Everybody. And how many people, like the minute September comes on, like even the horns, like just jump up and sing along, or played it at their wedding, or, it's become such a part of culture. That's a big song. Definitely.
Now, is her estate trying to sell the house with all the furnishings intact, or are they going to sell off the furnishings like at an auction or something?
The ideal thing would be for someone who wants to maintain the house. And, maybe use it as a studio where people can come record and keep the collection intact. That's the goal. But we'll see if there's that person, who would maintain it.
It does have a pretty sweet recording studio in the house.
Yes, with, as you see in one of the spreads in the pop-up book, with all her gold and platinum records, and you pull the tabs to reveal the titles of them all.
That is so cool. The book is just wonderfully engineered. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a book as elaborate. I mean, I'm used to children's pop-up books, I guess, which I had growing up and have seen lately, but these have intricate detail.
Yeah, we really went for it. And now, by the way, I'm totally obsessed, and I am doing books for other people and other, not just architectural, but for museums and different collections and things like that. So I hope to start a new trend of very elaborate pop-up books.
Hilary, this has been really wonderful to talk with you. Thank you so much for sharing this story about Allie and about the house.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for doing what you're doing and keeping it all alive.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Palm Springs, Malibu, Los Angeles, and Toronto.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 25,000 significant modernist houses, and access 5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Bobby Morris. Got a guest to suggest for our show? Write her at bobby@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guile. George and I'll be back soon with another surprisingly affordable edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.